Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. For those of you whom I haven't met, I'm Wes Johnston. I am the recently elected CEO of TIA. For those whom I have met, thank you for coming. The others, I hope, please take the opportunity to introduce yourself to me. I'd like to get to know you. Welcome. On behalf of the entire TIA family, staff, membership, invited guests, welcome to the 2017 Jam. You know, the introduction or the voice of God on the production side said, the show will begin in 2 minutes. I'm gonna point out a word. It's not a show. It's a conference. And it's a conference of like-minded individuals with a shared purpose and commitment to the industry that we love. So thank you for being here, because in the room are architects of next-generation networks, the suppliers of those networks, and the builders of those networks and the connectivity that is enabled. There's a lot going on, and all of it is exciting. Take a look at virtualization as one example. Virtualization is enabling the scaling on a level we've never seen before. We're seeing also the digitization of everything: voice, video, content. And the prodigious growth of wireless is enabling consumption of content like we've never seen before. We're going to hear shortly from leaders in the media entertainment communications space, and you're going to hear a little bit about how wireless and OTT are shaping consumption of content. All of this is allowing us to connect individuals, industries, and communities in ways that are unprecedented. If I had asked you, or I don't know, call it 10 years ago, could a company come out of nowhere to challenge the behemoth that was Walmart? Think of the advantage that Walmart had: stores, footprint, supply chain, distribution, sourcing. And yet, Amazon came out of nowhere to more than disrupt that entire business model using the technology and the connectivity that all of you are part of creating. This represents enormous opportunity for all of us. This is just a snapshot of the current ecosystem, a depiction of the current ecosystem. All of this spells opportunity. It's also daunting, because all of this represent choices. My team has heard me say, never confuse strategic choices with strategic planning, and never confuse planning with execution. All of you in your businesses face choices of how you're going to capitalize on these opportunities. We're here to help. Along the way, TIA is reshaping how we deliver increasing levels of value to the membership and to the community. Technology acceleration is at the cornerstone of what we're here to enable to happen on behalf of all of you. One example, the work that we're doing in the NFV benchmarking and quality assurance, just one example of how technology acceleration is at the cornerstone of what we're doing. Market acceleration. Please take an opportunity to spend some time at the TIA Now session. Learn about the opportunities available from our video, our online content, the workshops. We're here to educate, because all of that enables the market acceleration that all of you are looking for. And finally, business advocacy. And that's really the policy management side. We've dramatically revamped our focus on this because it's so important to press for the change that's necessary for the advocacy to drive your business forward. I would be remiss in not pointing out and thanking the sponsors who have enabled this session. You're in the audience. I've sent personal notes to, I think, just about all of you, many of you. If I haven't reached out to you, I apologize. I will. Please connect with me. But your participation enables this to happen, so thank you for doing that. I now have the opportunity to introduce a gentleman I've known for many years, an industry visionary, a terrific CEO and leader, and a gentleman I also call a friend. Let me introduce CEO of Imagine Communications, Charlie Vogt.
Thanks, Wes. Appreciate it. So I am very excited about this morning. I get the opportunity to sort of bring the intersection of the media world to the traditional telecom world. I spent the last 25 years, like many of you, building much of the internet. And the last 4 years I've spent with Imagine, which is at the core of building the key software technology for the media companies and the broadcast companies around the world. And I've been talking to the board here at TIA over the last couple of years about the intersection that is occurring. You know, we've sort of quietly seen companies like Comcast acquire NBC, and we saw ABC acquire DirecTV and now Turner Broadcasting. And so the intersection between, you know, the traditional media companies who are creating content and the traditional telecom companies who are distributing that content is beginning to come together. And so I'm very excited to have with me this morning the three CTOs from Fox, One Media, which is a division of the largest broadcast holding company in the world, Sinclair, and the CTO of Disney, Brad Wall. So I'd like to introduce each one of them. First, Rich FRIEDEL, who's the CTO of Fox Network. You can kind of give him a little bit of a... Kevin Gage, who's the CTO of One Media. And Brad Wall with Disney ABC.
Charlie, I do have to make a comment. I learned last night in your absence. We can't call
You just wanted to say that I wasn't here.
No.
Yeah.
We can't, I've been told I can't call it a network because everyone here thinks a network is something different. We think a network has a capital N, and that you all think a network has a small n. So
actually, it's interesting you said that, because when I first got into this side, the media side of the space 4 years ago, we used the word, you all used the word network, and to me the network was the internet. I mean, it was what we were building, and you're right. There's a little n and a big N. So.
There you go. So I'll try to be.
If you just put TV network, I don't know if television is really going to be television in the future. We'll talk about whether or not we're going to use the word television in the near future, but I just use TV in front of network, and then I get by with that. Anyway, as I sort of mentioned, I'm so excited to have these three gentlemen up here, only because I've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with them over the last 4 years, and having spent so much of my career, building the blocks of the internet, and now seeing the media companies move away from their traditional way in which they were moving content into the hands of consumers. Things like IP and cloud and virtualization, things that many of us in this room have been working with and deploying for decades. The traditional media companies are just now beginning to look at how they can leverage the internet as a friend in moving content into the hands of consumers on devices like this. And then you have, the Spectrum repack that we all spent a lot of time over the last few years, sort of watching that movie evolve, and the broadcasters were sort of on pins and needles, trying to understand, what exactly the Spectrum repack impacts would be on their business, not just financially, but also how it would impact the way that they would transform their business. And then there's something that we'll talk a little bit about called ATS 3.0, which is really the ability to transform traditional broadcasting and leverage IP as a way to create a simulcast or a dual simplex means of communication. And so with that, let me just give you guys a softball kind of topic. I was a baseball guy, and so softballs are a little easier to hit. So, not that little N or the big N, but a big S, the future of television, which was sort of the topic here. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to your company? What does it mean to the industry? And I'll just start there, and then we can take it from there. So, Rich, what does the future of television look like for Fox? What does it mean to your audience? What does it mean to the telecom industry? And how is it changing, the business that you're living in every day?
Well, a very open-ended question there, Charlie. I'll try to do some of it justice. Look, we're a content company. Brad will probably say the same thing in a few moments. Our job is to get our content out everywhere, right? Ubiquity. That's our number one goal. So this is a really exciting time for us because there's now many more mechanisms and methodologies for us to be able to do that. So this is quite exciting. Just because to try to level set here with the audience, you have to remember we're primarily or have primarily been a business-to-business industry. Fox in particular have had virtually no direct-to-consumer businesses at all. And people have said to me things like, oh, you do DVDs for movies. No, actually we sell them to Walmart, right? Or now I guess to Amazon. And so we don't really have a consumer business. So this is really new for us. So it's sort of exciting as we learn and try to build the systems and the methodologies necessary to do it. A number of the people in your organization, of course, are business-to-business companies as well, but you also have some direct-to-consumer. So it's sort of an interesting mixture. For us, it's a challenging time that way. It is a challenging time for many reasons. Of course, the technology is changing, as you've alluded to. For broadcasting in particular, the business model is changing. Advertising streams have been disrupted. Amazon was mentioned earlier, but the digital industry is definitely impacting our advertising revenue structure. There are many, many more shows available, so that's changing how we do business. And then, of course, consumer expectations are changing. So it's a sort of a triple storm that has come at us to try to.
And does that mean that you have to disrupt the way you move the content around the internal network and ultimately to the consumers? You've been a big advocate and been very involved in a lot of new standards around IP and cloud and virtualization. And when you think about people in the room here who are trying to understand what is changing for you, not just from the business models, but also from the technology enablement perspective.
Well, remember, our main business is getting content out to consumers, right? Getting it watched and hopefully monetized. And my job, of course, is to, just as all of my peers here, trying to figure out which of those technologies is the smartest or most efficient way to do that. In a modern age, it's sort of self-evident that you have no choice but to make use of the tools and the techniques that are available with internet technology. It's so widespread, you really don't have much of a practical choice. But it does bring us so many, because there's so many opportunities that are just essential. So the easiest one is, we can go around the room and take a vote about is HD more important, or is ultra high definition more important, or is wide color space more important, or is some aspect of data surrounding it important. In any case, I have to transmit that signal, that information, right? Today, in a traditional television environment, we don't really have a good mechanism to do that. Many of the solutions at the moment, to get into details, in order to get an ultra high definition signal around, we actually run 4 wires of HD and then glue it back together. That's not a sustainable.
It's really where SDI baseband really runs out of headroom.
Steam. That's right. It's not a sustainable model, right? We talked yesterday at the CTO meeting about scale and extensibility. That's what we have to get to, and that's what IP brings to us. It's ubiquitous. It's very cost effective, and it's hugely flexible, so that, as I like to call it, we build an agnostic plant. It doesn't care what the standard is today. We'll be able to adapt to anything going forward in the future.
So 2 years ago on Fox Network, Marie Bartiromo made a big announcement that Disney was one of the most iconic companies in the world, was moving their entire legacy master control systems to an IP cloud-based virtualized environment. Maybe, Brad, you can talk to us a little bit about why Disney ABC decided to take that plunge 12, 18 months ago, and what does that mean for your business as you think about the go-to-market strategy going forward?
Yeah, I think I can answer that a little bit with the other question, as sort of a combo here. I think, at Disney ABC, we've always looked at what's happening in the consumer landscape, where the consumers, where the viewers going. We were, the first when the first video iPod came out, we were the first content company to put our video and our programming on iTunes for sale. We also launched a full episode player a few years after that to provide free view of our shows and catch-up shows online. We continued with our Watch ABC and Watch Disney Channel and Disney Junior, Disney XD, and freeform applications. Really the first big media company to have a TV Everywhere application out there. We've kind of always kept our eye on where the consumer is going and what the consumer is doing, and trying to make sure that we have provided a great foundation to be able to meet them wherever they're going to be. That was a big motivator for us in looking at the move to virtualized master control. Clearly there are efficiencies that we can find as a company, but not just moving to a virtualized environment or a cloud-based environment for master control for efficiency purposes. We looked at how does this help set the stage for us to be in places to meet those consumers as they're going.
How does it change the relationship with you and the traditional distributors?
In one way, it's going to be providing us ability to give higher bitrate feeds out to them. The new virtual MVPDs or digital MVPDs that have sprouted up, they're asking for very high bitrate feeds, contribution feeds. They're asking for things inside of the feeds like triggers and demarcation for program boundaries. A lot of things that in certain pieces of the cable industry we've done to some extent. But now being able to do that, in partnership with Imagine, a lot of the technology that we're doing at ABC out of New York is how do we provide these new platforms, the ability for trick functionality, for example, a cloud DVR, a fast forward disable, or an instant VOD delivery. It's great for the consumer. It's great for us. It's great for these new services. We could have only thought through those things and had the right frame of mind for that based on the foundation that we had laid by going cloud and going IP with the master control layer. And one good thing too is, our retired CTO, ex-CTO, Vince Roberts used to say that in our jobs we basically have to sleep with one eye open. And it is true, but by moving, for example, all of our cable networks over to cloud playout in a virtualized environment, I actually sleep a lot better because I have a lot more redundant ways to not only feed my MVPD partners or the digital MVPDs, but built-in redundancies, a lot more layers of automation. It's providing a great foundation for us to be able to meet the consumer where they're going.
We're going to get to the opportunity for some of the people in the room and how they see you as a prospective customer in the future. But Kevin, what's unique about the three of you is not only are you content creators, but you're also broadcasters of that content that you're creating. And there's been so much consolidation that's happened over the last several years. And as long as I've been on the equipment supplier side, we've always been years behind the consolidation of our customers, which puts a lot of strain and stress on the suppliers. I've certainly seen a ton of consolidation in the media space in the last 4 years. Sinclair's certainly been on a tear over the last several years, buying the Tennis Channel. You just bought Tribune. One Media was created to really focus on the next generation architecture for what the new broadcaster of the future looks like, banking on the fact that the Spectrum repack would help fund some of those initiatives. Kevin, can you talk a little bit about what you're doing and what is ATS 3.0 and how does that change the entire broadcast landscape as you see it today?
Wow.
Simple question.
Yeah, that is a big softball. As Charlie said, One Media was created as the innovation arm of Sinclair Broadcast. Sinclair Broadcast is a content creator. It's a licensor of content. And it's also a distributor over our IP networks, so B2C through MVPDs, but also over our towers, which is our own distribution channel. And so something like, what
you mean those rabbit ears that are in
Yeah, well, we're working on that. That's what the 3.0 is. We can give you flat panels. So the point being is that we have all the same challenges that Richard and Brad have, is that we're working on cloud playback, play out. We're looking on maximizing efficiencies of being able to do distribution
to multiple sources, including consumers. So all of that's good and said and done, but we also have this really nice network ourselves, which is, you know, close to 223 towers across the United States that also can distribute content. And we needed to find a way, and that's why I was brought on and why One Media was formed, was how do we maximize that capability? Because if you think about it, you know, how was it, 60 years now? Maybe more than that. There's been one way of receiving something off of those towers, and for a long time that was really good. It was a television set, received a signal from one of those towers, and that's the only way you got your content. It was the only window in. And then it fragmented as satellite came on board and as MVPDs grew. But it still was the only way to get the content to those MVPDs and to those satellite companies. So for a long time, it was the power. But the problem is that power meant that it stagnated. Yeah. And it didn't keep up with the rest of the industry. And so 3.0 was an attempt, and by the way, we have the chairman of ATSC right here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We decided that, you know what, we had to catch up. That's like a no-brainer duh thing. But the point being is that we went to an all-IP network. And so what IP network to us means, and I heard there were some discussions about digitization, and we're all like, well, we did that 20 years ago. Well, we're in the same boat with IP. He's like, duh, it's IP. Well, we're finally getting there in the broadcast space, and that's what 3.0 was. And so 3.0 is it's data neutral. It doesn't care what it is. And so when you have your conversation about what TV is, well, what's TV? My daughter watches it on her phone or her iPad. She doesn't care just as long as she's watching it. And some of it's coming through a direct TV blasted to the house. Some of it's coming off of Netflix or from Amazon. And she doesn't really care how she's getting it. She's getting it where she wants it and how she wants it. And that's what ATSC is going to help solve 3.0, is that we can be able to put out these IP streams and blast them through cars, blast them through houses, get them on mobile devices, get them in a Starbucks or on a public transit, and you now have another distribution service that's maximized for the efficiency of mass distribution. So I know we're going to probably talk about direct-to-consumer and the ability to have that, you know, one-on-one experience, and that's definitely a path that our society is going. But historically, for millennia, there's also been what we call the water cooler experience, which is where we have all accessed the same content at the same time and enjoyed the same experience. And that's what mass distribution means. Now, that mass distribution is more than just television. It's data. It's 30% of the country that doesn't have quote-unquote broadband by the FCC standards, pre-positioning your on-demand content down at their house. So there's a lot of capabilities that 3.0 will have that will work within that mesh of a network, which includes 5G, which includes LTE, which includes Wi-Fi and broadband to the home. And it has its place in there. And I think that's what's really exciting to me, because if you, as I said, you look at Sinclair, we're the largest creator of local content. And we need to get that to the consumers, and we don't care how it gets there. If it comes off our tower or it comes off of somebody's MVPD service or a satellite service or over a 5G connection, we don't care. But we know we want to get it to everybody as quick as we can.
So let's talk a little bit about what's most important to your shareholders and to the senior leaders of your company, and that's how you make money. And at the heart of transformation comes the challenges associated with, you know, how are you making money today and how do you have to figure out a way to make money in the future. And, you know, I try to keep things simple with our own board, that our customers make money just one of two ways. They either have ad-supported content or they have subscription-supported content, for the most part. Yes, you make content and you can license that content, you can sell that, but fundamentally, you're either selling ads to support your content or you're selling an audience to buy a subscription. And what you're talking about, Kevin, is really an opportunity to move away from just an audience advertising model to a model where you can now sell both ads and subscriptions into the market, where the traditional, your traditional way in which you got broadcast television to consumers outside of cable television and satellite was ad-supported.
That's correct. I mean, both those opportunities are on the table, but there's a third opportunity, which is now that we have the reach or the scale with a 3.0 network, we have the ability to sell the ability to use that network for other services.
To others.
To others. And as I said, it's more than just TV as we call TV or music as we call music today. It's pre-positioning content down at the house. It's getting an iOS update out to 30 million people so you don't melt the last mile. It's getting telematics down to a car. So there's a lot of opportunities. Don't know which one is right because the crystal ball isn't really that crystal clear at the moment. But the fact is you now have a platform and smarter people than me are going to figure out how to use that distribution platform.
So 3 years ago, I sat on stage at NAB with guys like Liberty Mutual and Charter and Comcast and I actually think ABC. I think Disney was part of that, and we talked about this notion that their content creators would eventually go direct to consumers, and everyone on the stage except for me said, "No way, that'll never happen. We would never move away from our cable partners. We're all in, and here we are, 2.5 years later, and there's more content that's being created and delivered direct to consumers than ever before. And we talk a lot about cord cutters, and cord doesn't mean you're cutting the connectivity to your home or your mobile device because you still need spectrum and you still need internet to deliver anything. But the reality is does Fox and does Disney, when the marketing folks and the creative folks are thinking about how am I going to best monetize my new content, whether it's a TV series, a movie, whatever it is it more of that direct-to-consumer model in the future? Do you think that that's where it's going, or do you think this is a phase and that it will ultimately come back into some hybrid model where people will actually sit around their television screen or whatever we call it in their family room and watch TV as a family?
Well, look, I'm afraid, look, I have no good crystal ball either on this, but I am afraid that people sitting around the family room watching television may indeed be something that's starting to fade. But I do believe that there is just more and more desire for content, right? That's the key here. And Fox is going to distribute its content in any and every way that it can, as I used the word ubiquity earlier, and we're going to give it to people in ways that they want to receive it. The consumer is driving us as much as we're driving the consumer. So we've launched consumer businesses as our competitors have. We'll continue to expand that for the moment. Obviously, if the marketplace takes us someplace different, so be it. But our primary form of distribution at the moment is absolutely through partners. It's far and away the most important business relationships we have, on the distribution side, and I don't see that changing.
But
if anything,
you're
more
both
of them.
buying a router. I was telling Sue Spradley earlier today that Imagine's been selling routers for a long time. She said, "Gosh, you guys make IP routers?" And I said, "No, we make this thing called a baseband router." But companies like Cisco and Arista and others who have never really sold to you are now selling IP routers to your company, right? I mean, when you think about the suppliers in the audience who have not thought of you other than the IT department, because everything that was designed, built, and deployed in the network operation department was primarily built historically on purpose-built proprietary technology has changed, and that whole door has been completely opened up. And a lot of my supplier partners that have historically looked at your industry and said, that's not a place for me to participate, it's now an opportunity to participate.
Yeah, there's a notion that I have to dispel, and that is we have been huge users of IP and Cisco routers. Sorry for all the other manufacturers in the room. Everything that we've had on the air for, I'm going to say 20 years, probably more, has been digitized. Everything's been on servers, everything's been stored as digital files. Virtually anything you've watched on any of our FOX networks or Nat Geo or FX or any of those things has been stored and gone through a router, a Cisco type router, and all those kind of things. What those systems couldn't do until recently is live television, right? Now, in Fox's case, that's a tremendous amount of what we do. We're known for sports. We have just tremendous, we do over 10,000 sporting events a year. Those are the systems we're trying to build, the technology we've been working on, that's the standards that we've been pushing for, because we've got to move the live into that mode. That's why we're not as far along as Brad is on virtualization of our master controls and things like that, because trying to do live is really hard at this point. Now that's going to change, and we're driving
they've
that.
figured it out with our technology.
Okay. I'll let Brad deal with that. No, seriously, the level of sophistication we use is up until very recently just not possible.
Yeah.
Right? But that's changing. And that's the exciting part of this. We are going to be using those techniques and that technology. We are using those techniques as time goes forward. And as you know, we've been spearheading the standards at SMPTE and other places in order to ensure that happens.
Yeah, I don't know how many of our traditional TIA members are part of SMPTE. I mean, do you see a lot of the traditional telecom suppliers part of SMPTE?
Well, there's some. It's very difficult to see anything here with these lights. I'm sorry. So I'm sure I have some friends out in the audience somewhere here that are active in that space.
Is that something you would encourage?
Absolutely. Look, that area is growing. You mentioned Cisco. I'm sure they're members of this organization. Certainly, they're well represented in our facility.
But potentially an alliance or partnership opportunity for even TIA. I mean, part of the reason why I wanted you guys to come here and I wanted people to listen to what you guys have to say is it's an expanded TAM for everyone, right? It's an expanded opportunity for better collaboration amongst the media companies and the traditional distributors of that content.
Look, many of the people represented in TIA are our partners today. Some of them do are MVPDs, right? They are distributors for us. We use a lot of the same equipment. If you come into my plant at the moment, notwithstanding your point about it has a lot of bespoke equipment in it, I'll take you through rows and rows and rows that look like any data center that any of these companies either have or provide or build. That technology is merging and melding, and you would just think there needs to be, not needs to be, but there is some synergy to be had. To be honest, I remember TIA with like EIA and CTA and those things back when I was more active as an engineer in the standards and things that this organization did. I'm not as knowledgeable about which we're currently. I was trying to figure that out yesterday as I walked around.
So before I open it up for questions, Kevin, let me just ask you maybe a loaded question. I mean, was the Spectrum repack successful?
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. I think, the COB and government had a certain target that they were expecting, and I don't think they hit that target. And I think the cost.
Why do you think that is?
I can't answer that question.
We should ask the audience. They were the bidders.
Yeah, I was going to say, why wasn't that Spectrum expensive enough for you, or less expensive enough? So I think from the standpoint of that and the costs that we know the FCC put in place, there were some challenges, and I think perhaps it didn't meet where what folks' expectations were from Sinclair standpoint. I know we're comfortable where we came out on it. I know there are some public institutions out there that were able to raise capital for what they want to do in the public space. So from that standpoint, I think it's fine. I think it was the Spectrum repack ended up just being more confusing than anything. I think to me, that's what my takeaway is of it. Out of that Spectrum repack came 3.0 and a drive to push 3.0. And instead of doing a repack and then 3.0, it's now like, okay, how do we start merging this all together? So to me, it's been exciting in that it's created a little bit of an accelerant, so to speak, to start driving 3.0 out into the marketplace faster. So that's my take.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like you're always chasing the advantages of technology, and the repack timeline took probably 2 years longer than I think the government or anyone else was hoping it would take, even the broadcasters. But along the way, the demand or the need for more spectrum for a lot of the carriers changed, right? Because there was a lot of advancements in technology that allowed them to utilize or reutilize more spectrum than they had. And so I think that certainly, timing's everything. And I think the timing of the auction certainly had an impact. But anyway, with that, we've got a few minutes left, and I certainly wanted to open it up for questions that this group might have for these three gentlemen.
Charlie, while we're waiting, I'll make the point that the repack certainly is an opportunity for many of the members of TIA, right?
Absolutely.
Because with the repack and stations moving, there are roughly 1,000 stations have to change
Yeah.
frequencies, and in some cases physically move and things like that. So from an infrastructure standpoint, there's a huge play. I'm sure that everybody's
And you're
aware
going
of
to take
that.
advantage of all the new technology when you make this move, right?
I would say you would be foolish if you didn't.
Right.
So thoughts, questions? You got a mic right there to your right.
Steve Pastorkovich with NTC, the Rural Broadband Association. I appreciated hearing about ubiquity. Several of you mentioned that. A lot of our members, we represent about 850 rural broadband providers. Many of them have customers who are so remotely located they no longer get over-the-air signals, especially since the DTV transition. So they're dependent on an MVPD to get any signal at all. So with the advent of ATSC 3.0, there have been concerns about, while it has a lot of potential and promise, as you mentioned, for especially some of the smaller MVPDs in rural areas, there might be new costs, there might be new concerns. So right now, and hey, I'm part of it, broadcasters and some of the MVPDs are kind of throwing darts at each other at the FCC. I've got another load to throw on Thursday when the reply rounds are due. But once we're past that, how do we get past throwing darts at each other and talking about how we can collaborate and get these benefits out to consumers in new and mutually beneficial ways? Thank you.
Well, clearly that's not exactly my area of expertise, the politics and whatnot, and I don't want to play with the business side of this because at the end of the day, that's what the dart throwing is. But what I will say is, my job is to make sure we get our signal any place and every place it can possibly get with as little friction as possible. So presumably, once the business guys get done and the lawyers get done, people like you and I will be able to make this work.
But I think what I heard you say is, will ATS 3.0 provide a platform that will enhance the delivery of content to rural America differently than what it is today?
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's no question.
I mean, you guys have stations everywhere. I mean, you've got stations in major markets, you got stations in small
He has
small
stations
markets.
everywhere. We only have 26. You have 260 or
We only
something.
have 8, so.
See?
Yeah. So I think one of the key areas of what you're saying, and I agree with Richard, let the belt, inside the Beltway guys fight with the inside of the Beltway guys. That's a whole different world. But when you talk about actual implementation, one of the things that 3.0 enables is something we call a single frequency network, which allows you to expand out further into the marketplace, and that'll both be good for consumers and for MVPDs if they want to be able to take the 3.0 signal. I mean, from the standpoint of 3.0, there is nothing mandatory about it. That's the one thing to recognize. There is nothing mandatory from the government. It is purely a market-based opportunity for us to get into the market with it. The 1.0 core services will continue as the 1.0 core services are.
Hey, hi, Gary Bolton with Adtran. I was reading in the Wall Street Journal that only about 12% of people watch live TV right now. Everybody else is binge watching Netflix or something else. And then I saw that Hulu now has a service where they don't really differentiate. They use AI, and basically, like I would when I go to Amazon, it kind of tells me what the things I want to watch, and it doesn't differentiate between live TV or what's on a DVR or what might be on Netflix or Amazon and so forth. So do you see that the network's going to be changing differently depending on whether it's sporting events with live TV or if it's these other ways to binge watch different kinds of and also there was a high correlation between demographics. The younger you are, the more likely you are to binge watch something versus someone else, maybe more my generation sitting in a living room.
I grab that one. I think I would love to see that article. I think live TV is still very, very, very important to us as a company, and the Nielsen ratings don't show that only 12% of the country are watching live television. I mean, I think one of the exciting things about some of the new services and some of the things that we're doing in IP and that we're doing with our cloud playout, et cetera, is using the live feed to create on-demand content and to create like I said earlier, the cloud DVR type content. So the live signal actually becomes the engine to feed a lot of these on-demand services. We have a whole separate group inside of our organization that is specifically designed to take content, repackage it, and get it out to Mvpds or get it out to Netflix or Hulu or whoever it is. What's exciting about where we're headed is that now our live signals can actually start literally being the feeder, and through automated processes be able to get that content out to the consumers even faster than we could in the past. We're still going to be in a hybrid world for a while there, but it is true. Some of the we have seen on our kids networks, for example, that kids are a little bit of the younger audience is a little bit more slanted towards watching on demand or binge watching and things like that, for sure. But it is still actually somewhat shocking to see how large of an audience is still watching at least our content live. News and sports will always be important.
Add to that, the news and sports live content, of course, that goes without saying. I do question those numbers. I see some of them too, and they're all over the place, of course. Statistics, you can get any number you want, probably. But I will say that it really depends upon the kind of station and the market. There are a number of networks. Univision is one that has quoted before that 40% of their viewing is over the air. So you have to judge what your particular business is. Certainly the other interesting statistic is over-the-air viewing is increasing, not decreasing, which is sort of counterintuitive. I guess you'd have to argue cord cutters perhaps, but it's a very interesting time in that way. But it's also an exciting thing to say. People love to say somebody's dying, television's dying or cell phones are dying or whatever's dying. That's a news story, right? And there's no question that our business is challenged and it's being diminished to some extent. But if you look at the statistics and the numbers, we have a long, long way to go yet. So we did the Super Bowl this year, and I don't think we published these numbers, but I do know what the numbers were, the number of people who watched it digitally, not through traditional television. And those numbers would not be a successful television show if it was on our traditional network still.
But I
Now,
think
that will change. I get it. I don't want anybody to think I'm like going to bury my head in the sand. It is changing. We have to deal with it, but it's still really early on the curve.
Which is why you guys have been proactively looking at how do you traverse and transform yourself
Exactly.
so that you can participate in all these different mediums over time, right? So let me just close by making a couple of comments and then give you an opportunity to sort of provide your thoughts. So TIA, fundamentally focused historically on the evolution of the Mvpds as the world that I now live in. When I was when I was the CEO of GenBand, we still called it the telecom industry, which is, I don't know that the telecom folks would call them telecom folks anymore because their business has changed. But most of what TIA has historically been about is the evolution of that part of the industry. That has changed over the last 5 years. I mean, we have members now that are part of the automobile industry, and there's been a huge focus on the evolution of everything that impacts the Internet of Things. Bringing the media companies into the equation of how you participate in this whole notion of the Internet becomes a means to getting your content in the hands of consumers, in my opinion, is an opportunity for everybody in this room. With the help of some of the media companies, 2 years ago, Imagine created this organization called AIMS, which was really all about IP multimedia. And we went from 0 to 70 members that included all of the traditional telecom companies that began to help formulate an organization to ensure that we could comply with standards and that we could actually demonstrate to the broadcasters and media companies that we could create an end-to-end IP cloud virtualized network from glass to glass, right? And at NAB this year, which for those of you who have never been to NAB, it's the second largest trade show in the world. There was 105,000 people in Vegas this year that were viewing all of the new innovation around television and the way television gets moved. was pretty amazing. And so selfishly for me, a board member of TIA for a long time, part of the reason why I brought you three here was to stimulate thinking with this group of how they are to think about today's broadcaster, today's TV network, today's content companies differently than maybe they thought of them before, as both an opportunity as well as potentially a partner. And with that, I'll just let you leave with your thoughts around what you would encourage this group to think about and intersect with you going forward. And Rich, maybe you start.
You started with the question of what's the future of television, and to me the future of television is not significantly different than the past. We're going to educate and inform the public. That's what our goal, our mission is, and how we make our money, right? And that creative process is not going to change. What will change is how we distribute it. But that's a smaller component of our fundamental business. We will absolutely make use of internet technology and the internet and any of the technologies that you guys build or supply or offer, because again, we're after the ubiquity of our content everywhere. That's what's important to us.
I'm going to put my wingnut on real quick and just talk about, from a technology standpoint, one of the things I felt interested in. I'm actually going to go to some of the panels afterwards to just get a sense of where it's going on. But as we deploy 3.0 into the marketplace, the technologies in the back room, so network virtualization, SDN, I don't know if CRAN is going to be there yet or not. These are all important to us because, like Rich and Brad, we want to hit every distribution path as possible. But when you have the rollout of 3.0, the ability to go over each one of those paths is very important. And 3.0 is going to be the single frequency or MFN networks as well. And so the ability to virtualize that distribution of content and other data services over IP pathways is going to be very important from us. So we're learning from you on how you're doing network virtualization, how you are applying SDNs into the marketplace, and then looking at how we can create that aggregate service operating centers and cloud operating services centers to be able to do that distribution on a nationwide basis. And that's ultimately what 3.0 is going to be, a nationwide wireless one-way network. And we want to marry it with what the best of breed technologies you guys are already implementing.
Yeah, I think I'd go back to the word on Wes's slide, the connectivity word. I mean, connectivity has never been more important to, I think, broadcast business as it is today. And not just on the distribution side of our business. I think about the way that we're now creating our live hits for our talent at ABC News. When we're, if you watch World News, there's most likely, a correspondent out in the field, could be internationally, who's most likely that live hit is coming in over either an open internet connection or some sort of IP-based backhaul. And I think about some of the things we're doing, partnering with Adobe, for example, and doing live character animation with actors in our Burbank Center home, where we're doing real-time feedback over Facebook Live and YouTube Live with kids interacting with the characters that they only see in an animated show. And that's a two-way communication back and forth over internet. So just a couple of examples of where connectivity is ultra critical to how we make content and how we distribute the content, and being a content company first, that is really critically important to us. So I think we're going to just continue to see that need rise and grow. Obviously on the distribution side and everything we're doing with IP playout, that connection between us and the MVPDs, these digital MVPDs are ABC affiliate stations, like at Sinclair, for example. We're always looking for new ways to get those signals to those stations in a way that makes a better consumer experience for them and for us as a company.
So Brad, Kevin, Richard, thank you for spending time with the board yesterday. I know they got a lot out of that. And thank you for this morning. I think this was very helpful, so I certainly appreciate it. And I hope that proves out there.
There's an important point worth underscoring here, which is despite the maturity of IP-based technologies, the adoption of it into the broadcast video infrastructure was different across the community. and that's because of the impact on the business models. We could have a whole other discussion of the monetization of that traffic, right, down to the consumer. So again, technology here is driving change, and that's an important part.